and welcome to a brand new video. Today we have a new mysterious case that has been highly requested, so I review it and I found it very interesting. Today we'll talk about the monster of the Andes. But before we begin, don't forget to follow me on all my social media. You know I have a billion social media accounts, and the most important thing is to subscribe to this channel and to activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a video. Anyway, without anything else to say, let's begin. The case of the monster of the Andes. Pedro Alonso Lopez was born on October 8, 1948 in Bernalillo, Tolima, Colombia. According to what they say, when he was 6 months old, his mother moved to Santa Isabel in the peak of the violence era. That's how it's called, the era in Colombia in which there were many wars, assaults, forced displacements, among other things. This war caused around 200,000 deaths, which is something atrocious. He was the seventh son of 13 the woman had, and they all came from different fathers. And why was that? Because the mom was a prostitute, and the sons came precisely from her clients. This woman was called Beninda Lopez, and due to the decisions she made, he had a truly disturbing childhood, you could say. That woman didn't have a husband, as you can imagine, and had all his children living in extreme poverty. They live in a house in which there was only one room, and there wasn't doors or absolutely anything to divide the spaces, so they slept in the same place in which the mother worked. Namely, as they were divided by a simple curtain, the children heard all the time what she said, did, and well, many other things, with her clients. Clearly, this created many traumas and odd things in them, and besides that, the man with whom she had fallen more hardly in love, so to speak, which was Pedro Alonso's dad, a man called Megardo Reyes, died in that time of war, for he was a part of the Colombian Conservative Party, and he was shot dead before Pedro was born. All this added to the fact that the mom led a very particular life in front of her children, caused her to be extremely controlling of his own children, who also didn't have any paternal figure. This also created a very violent environment in the house. Many friends and even neighbors of this woman say that she was very violent with her children, that they could hear how she beat them, how they scream, and what kind of work the woman did in front of her own children. After all that this boy started to saw, at some point when he was 9 years old, he tried to rape one of his sisters. This forced his mother to kick him out of the house, and he ended up living on the street. So imagine that, him starting to live on the streets of Bogota at that age, and he didn't end up in good hands either. He was a boy that was both innocent and not, and he lived outside a home. He started to find people that weren't too good. Clearly, he also started suffering from abuses on the street because of other homeless people, and all this began generating some traumas in him, but he also had a stronger character, so he started getting involved in street fights with knives, razors. He also started smoking bazuco, which is a kind of drug derived from cocaine and many other terrible things. He also searched for food in the trash, lived in abandoned buildings, and he did all that until he was around 12 years old. That's when an American couple found him, completely far gone, malnourished, deteriorated because of the things he consumed, and they decided to adopt him. They gave a fresh start to his life. The kid went back to school, met people, and lived a normal life, rehabilitating himself. But due to things in life, he ended up falling on the wrong hands again, and this time one of his teachers abused him too. This created a very strong shock in him again, and he decided to escape his home and go back to the streets. He started stealing and kept consuming substances and many other things. But in that moment, Colombia ended that heavy wartime in some way, and the Colombian society started to get better again, so he tried to re-enter society and look for a job, but he got rejected everywhere. That's how he became a common offender. He started to steal cars, to rob people outside, and many other things. When he was 21 years old, 1969, he was caught for those crimes. He was tried and sentenced to 7 years in prison. With this sentence and during his time behind bars, he was abused again by 4 inmates that were there in the same jail. However, some days after this happened, he changed some chip in his mind and say, I won't let these people do whatever they want, and basically got his revenge from those 4 inmates. That's how he cut these 4 men's throats, but he only got 2 additional years to his sentence because they saw that as a personal defense. And something very interesting awoke in him, which was the fact of thinking about killing and that it gave him pleasure. What happened? He started having many weird thoughts and pondering what kind of victims he really wanted. And that's when 3 important things are linked. His profound hatred for his mother, the excessive consumption of woman pornography, and obviously the pleasure or the feeling he got from murdering other people. When he got out of prison in 1978, he decided to travel to Peru and start a new life there. But what he really started doing was looking for victims for his new murders. That's where he started to look for young women or even girls from indigenous communities. They say that he even started with the Ayacuchos. He looked for very young girls from local tribes who were easily convinced, and he attacked them in the morning. He said it was in the morning because it was the time when they would trust him and not at night. He offered them candies, among other things, to abduct them. That's how he developed his modus operandi, which was to lure them, then abuse them, and finally asphyxiate them until they die. For him, that was especially pleasurable because he said that for doing that in the morning, he could see how the light in the eyes of these girls went out little by little. Besides that, he looked for the girls that, according to himself, had innocent looks, for those were the ones he got more pleasure out of, in a way. It is said that around 100 girls from these tribes were his victims, and on many occasions after raping and killing them, he did you know what with the girls' bodies. After that, he buried them and collected them in a single mass grave to be able to use them later as some kind of dolls. However, he said that at some point he got tired of practicing you know what with the lifeless bodies, so that was when he started looking for more victims. In that moment, he tried to kidnap and do the same with a 9-year-old girl from the Ayacucho community. But when he tried to do that, several members of the tribe noticed what was happening and decided to chase him. They obviously managed to catch him, and in that moment, they started to enforce their own tribal justice. They removed his clothes, disposed of all of his belongings, and that was when they completely buried him in sand. They tied him and also covered him in honey. This was with the goal of the ants devouring him piece by piece. He said that this was one of the worst moments of his life and one of the worst revenge he suffered. But something happened, and I don't know how to interpret that, but in that moment a woman came who was an American missionary in a jeep and saved him. She practically saw what this tribe was doing to him and said like, hey, I'm going to make this man pay and I'm going to take him to the police, but you shouldn't take justice in your own hands. So she managed to convince the tribe to surrender this man to her so she could take him to the police. There are 2 different versions of this. There's one that says that she really saved him and left him free afterwards. Another one that says she took him to the police. It appears the second one is true. However, the Peruvian authorities didn't want to follow all the denounce process, among other things, regarding this man because he wasn't a 100% Peruvian, so they found very tiresome, so to speak, to arrange the process with Colombia. That's when this man was deported to Colombia, but in the process he escaped. In that moment, a peak of disappearances and women's murders started to happen in that area, but the authorities began linking that with woman trafficking and sex trafficking, for in that moment that was peaking too. Then 1980 comes and there's a great flood in a place called Ambato in Ecuador. In that moment there are very heavy floods that obviously took many families. There were many persons missing, and when the rescue labors started, among other things, they realized that the water had uncovered the bodies of some girls. For to be precise, they had been strangled and, well, the same thing of the other victims had happened to them, but nobody knew who was the culprit. He around that time went to a place called Carvina Poveda, which was also in Ecuador, and there's a woman that went with her daughter Maria to the supermarket. It's not clear if this happened inside the store or in the parking lot, but this man approached the girl and offered her some things. She didn't accept, but in that moment the man grabbed her and take her quickly. Right then, the mother noticed that, started to scream like crazy, and that attacked the attention of the store clerks and of the people who were outside, which prevented him from taking the girl. They took the man, saved the girl, and held him until the police arrived. The man was supremely calm when this happened. They said he only started talking nonsense, and then the police took him to interrogate him. He completely refused to cooperate. He said he wasn't going to say absolutely anything, and indeed, he didn't say anything during the questioning, so they realized eventually they would have to come up with a solution. Quickly, they noticed that the man had a very strong Catholic faith, so they decided to call a priest called Father Cordoba Godinho for him to ask him questions. Maybe him, through his faith, could be able to make him talk. Indeed, the man started talking and telling him his whole version. He told him that basically, since he was 8 years old, he had lost his innocence and that he wanted to do the same to other people. He started to talk about all his victims, his modus operandi, and he said that he had ways of picking the girls he wanted as victims. He said that Colombian girls were very pretty, but that most of them were very mistrustful, so that's why he decided to go to Peru and Ecuador. He looked for the most innocent girls, also from communities where education wasn't the best, so he could take them more easily. From there, he did all the things I told you before. He took them to other places, he abused them, then asphyxiated them, dug a hole, and he started to burn them in groups of 3 or 4. For the father, these confessions started to be very strong, so he simply left, and that's when the police found out about everything that had happened, saying like, whoa, we have a serial killer, a complete psycho right here. Nonetheless, some doubt his testimony and said, this man is exaggerating, who knows what he's doing. They say to him, show us that what you're saying it's really true. And that's when he took them to one of the places in which he indeed had buried the bodies of 57 girls. There were more than 110 bodies around that place. Many of them couldn't believe that it was real, but then they found the bodies and they confirmed it was. Normally, in the investigations, it is thought that if a killer confesses and certain amount of bodies are found, the man indeed is telling the truth. It is said that combining Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, the man murdered more than 300 girls, which makes him the biggest serial killer in Latin America. He was only sentenced to 16 years in prison. I know, but you know that here in Latin America, especially in Colombia, there aren't life sentences or death penalties. By that time, 1980, the person that judged him found him guilty of the girls' murders, and not because he was just a killer, but because he cataloged him as insane. So for that reason, that sentence made him unimputable. Namely, instead of being in jail, he actually had to be inside a psychiatric hospital. Some investigators created his complete psychological profile, and some of them said, serial killers are usually created due to obsessions of some kind related to the mother, a hate relationship in simple words. These mothers aren't usually candidates to Mother of the Year. The common link seems to be the sexual component. Mothers that have many sexual partners, and the son knows that. Of course, children of prostitutes are more likely to fulfill these stereotypes if they're exposed to this kind of aggressive and detached behavior from the mother. And this fits him like a glove. Within all this, it was found that he was a sociopath killer with antisocial personality disorder without a conscience or even empathy. Besides that, he had a great ability for manipulation and deceit through the spoken word. After spending 4 years inside a psychiatric facility, they granted him a sort of fee, a miserable $50 bail, which was a lot in that moment, but not that much. They ordered him obligatory psychiatric treatment and a monthly follow-up. However, when they released him in 1988-1989, this was never done. The monster of the Andes completely disappeared, and until now, his whereabouts are unknown. It is unknown if he is alive or if he keeps committing crimes somewhere. Many people say that he never changed, that he still found pleasure in killing people, and that he was only waiting to get out to do that once again. Nowadays, and since 2002, the Interpol keeps looking for him. They posted his picture everywhere just in case someone sees him. He was last seen on September 22, 1999, when he went to the registry office to get a new ID. Also, the last person who saw him was his mom, for he visited her after he was released, but not to tell her she was guilty of all his disgraces. The only thing he told him was, "Mother, I'm going to bless you." She said he asked for money and then he left. It is said that in 2022, there were some crimes in El Espinal, and those crimes had a really similar modus operandi of the monster of the Andes, so it was thought it could be him. There are other people who think he has not been seen again because he was illegally executed, that someone with pending business with him killed him. But for example, his mom says she's sure he's still alive because usually when a relative or someone close to her dies, they always come to her in dreams or some vision or something. So she says that surely he is somewhere. Something very interesting about the man is that he said that it wasn't him who killed, it wasn't Pedro who killed, but a man called Jorge Patiño, like an alternate personality he had. Nowadays, no one has seen him again, so this video is good so you can see his picture, and if someone has information, they obviously should communicate to the authorities in charge of this case. One never thinks about Latin America having serial killers. It's not something that happens often, but this, friends, is a very interesting story. Very well, guys, I'll leave this case here. You know that if you like it a lot, don't forget to leave a like, the thumbs up, comment what you feel, what you think, and maybe if I forgot something to mention. Follow me on all my social media. You know I have a billion social media accounts, and the most important thing is to subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching me. Don't forget to follow your dreams, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!